in the meantime, while we're waiting for Chris, maybe I'll just go over a couple housekeeping items for this afternoon, similar to the rest of the day if you've joined us. So if you have any questions, you can put them in the Q&A chat box, and then towards the end of the session, we will answer them to the best we can. You can also use the chat box if you maybe don't have a question, but just a comment, or you just have something you'd like to say. You can also raise your hand, and then if you raise your hand, I have the ability to let you talk, and then you can unmute yourself. And if you have any feedback you'd like to give, we can do it that way. I do believe the session is being recorded, so just keep that in mind when you are engaging. Welcome, welcome. You're just muted, just so you know. Welcome, we're so excited to have you here today.
All right, hey guys.
Thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm good. Found the
Chris.
Oh, I'm doing better, hey Dale.
How's it going?
You know, I'm doing okay.
Kayas.
Yeah, I know, running around here sorting things out. So I'm glad I'm able.
Well, welcome. We're glad to have you today. So I'm just going to quickly share the screen before we get started, Chris. So here we go.
Yes, so this is Chris, who has just joined us, and Chris will be presenting. It's called Creating Space for Indigenous Knowledge and Education, How to Renew Our Relationship with Indigenous Education. So a little bit about Chris. Chris is Nakota. I'm sorry, Chris, I might not be able to get the pronunciation on that word. From the Carry the Kettle, Nakota, Oyaid, and Kinaseo Sipi Cree nations, and firmly grounds himself in Indigenous culture, language, and tradition. Chris's experience in education is extensive. He has taught every grade from 2 to 12 in international, national, provincial, and First Nation education systems. He has also served the roles of a special needs educator, acting principal, principal superintendent, and director of education, and director of Canada's largest First Nation teacher education program. Currently, Chris continues to work in the fields of Indigenous languages and education as a faculty member with First Nations University of Canada. And Chris, just before you entered, I went over a couple housekeeping items. So just so you know, I will be keeping an eye on the chat box and the Q&A, so you don't have to worry about any of that. And whenever you're ready, feel free to take it away.
All right, awesome. I'm assuming I have all the privileges of the power of the world to share my screen and do all that goodness.
I hope so, and if not, we'll get it fixed in 1 second. I think Dale, because he's the host, like Dale might need to. Okay, perfect.
Like I'm good to go. So once I get on to the presentation. So welcome to everybody. It's so glad, I'm so glad that this is finally here. You know, we had this conversation months ago. I think they planned about a year and some in the planning works and getting everything going and sorted out. So when we first had our conversations around here, they took me through a little bit of a test run, you know, to see what's this guy going to talk about, how's it going to be, and you know what's going to happen. And yeah, so I mean, I must have passed the test and I made it through, and I'm here to share with each and every one of you. So tanse gumagante Scribe sigas and kinaseo sipi uchinia and how konabi togahe amani amachi abi chega again agitaya tai hibi. So like the intro said, you know, I'm Nakota and I'm Nahio. I'm Cree and I'm Assiniboine. That's the background that I share, that I have. And that's the foundation that I bring forward. The rest of the schooling and the work that comes along with it are pieces to all of this journey and this good fortune that we all have. And I'm just grateful and thankful to have the opportunity to share a little bit of what I have with this group and with the people that are participating in this talk. And I have a lot of hope for the work that we do, and we work with young people. I feel that that's a space that helps us create a difference and helps us make a difference as we move forward. It's that work with those young people that really help us to build that space and that capacity. So I uphold and I uplift each and every one of you for the work that you do with young people in whatever capacity that is. in working with young people, and especially the Indigenous people that we're working with, getting into the perspectives in the mind of upholding and building the beauty of our nations and our relationship with one another. I want to, most of my presentation and the presentation style that I do is I use story in a lot of the work that I do. And with that and through that use of story, what I'm doing is I'm building a relationship with each and every one of you through that story. And not only does it do that, but it also helps us to better understand each other. I'm hoping that by the end of this, you have a better understanding of what I'm doing and why I do the work that I do for the purpose and intention that I do it. I'll share also a little bit about, perspectives on, how I work with young people that I've worked with young people in my career. But before I start, it's always important for me to acknowledge that we're in relationship with one another. With this keynote and with this presentation, we're in relationship in the ceremony of relationship building and kinship building with one another. And what I mean by that is I'm telling story to you and to breathe life into this relationship so that you can take story from me and that it's meaningful and you can make it relevant in the work that you do. And that's something that I've said or something that I've done in this presentation, is meaningful to you. That's what I'm hoping to do, and through this. So I want to welcome that, but I also am conscious and understand that we don't know each other, that we don't, we don't get a chance to visit one another the way that we would do in person. We don't get that opportunity to do this on this virtual space. Because of that, what I want to do is I want to make sure that I'm following protocol that I was taught. So the story that I'm going to share is a story that comes from my relatives, and one relative in particular. His name is Terry Brocky, and he's a Grovon. Terry's a Grovon from Fort Belknap, Manitoba, and Terry talked to me about this ceremony of speaking. Talked to me about the process of when we speak. From a non-Indigenous perspective, we feel that our words and everything that happens in terms of what we say happens in our minds, that our minds are thinking it, our brain is thinking these things, that our brain talks about it, our brain does this work, and then our brain then interprets this and then we speak it out. And Terry Brocky mentioned something. He had a mentor, an old grandmother that was lived to be 111 years old. And this old grandmother talked to him about something called the breath of life. And I had asked Terry, and I went through protocols in order to retell this story because it was meaningful and powerful to me when I first heard it. So he gave me this gift to be able to retell this story. So in this conversation, he went to this old grandmother and was talking to her about, he always puts his foot in his mouth, and he always makes mistakes when he's talking. And she said to him in a beautiful, calm, amazing way that we have to think about the things we say. And what she meant was that our words and what we say doesn't start in our minds, it starts in our hearts. And our hearts are where the most meaningful and powerful speeches and talks and conversations happen. And it travels all throughout our body. Our heart is our conduit to all of the pieces of our body, to our fingers, to our toes, tops of our heads, everywhere. It's all connected and everything flows from that center, including all the beauty of what we know, how we pray to our Creator, what we do in our songs. Everything originates in there, because when we talk, we don't only talk with our mouths and that, we talk with our entire body. And she told him, she said, you have to allow for your heart to send these words to your mind. Your mind is only an interpreter of the heart. Your mind interprets what needs to be said. And then you don't just say it quickly. You need to give the breath of life. You need to acknowledge that you are here on earth because the Creator willed it so. That you need to acknowledge that, and you need to do that before you start to talk, before you start to reply, before you start to have a conversation. When you do that, what's said will be meant to be. It'll be meant to be for everybody to hear and for everybody to be a part of. And then she looked at him and she went like this. And she gave that breath of life. She talked about what that meant. You allow that interpretation to happen. You allow that to happen, and then you can talk. And then you're able to say the things that you are saying. And I thought about that. I thought about that. And I thought about all the times that I got in trouble, by saying things too quickly, by not thinking about them and not allowing for the breath of life in that process of the ceremony of speaking, and not to take its true form. And I thought about all of those. And sometimes I reacted in anger. I thought I reacted too quickly. I thought I needed to jump in and make a statement before I forget it. All these times that were coming back into my mind. And then I came to the realization that I didn't take my breath of life those times. I didn't allow for the words to travel from my heart to my mind, be interpreted, and being able to talk. Man. And when I came to that realization, I thought, geez, that's what needs to be done. That's how we need to do it. Because our old people knew these things too. They knew that was a teaching that when you were gifted this opportunity to speak to people, that you needed to acknowledge and understand what that means to give that breath of life. It was so meaningful that back in the day, before people started to visit and talk to one another, what they would do is they would take the knife out of its sheath and they throw that knife into the ground in between the two people. And whoever threw that knife would say these words: if whatever I say offends you, I give you permission to use that knife on me. And what that does, it acknowledges the power of words. It acknowledges the power of talking. It makes you conscious of making sure that you give that breath of life. It makes you powerful in this space of understanding that, what you say could be hurtful to somebody else. So you're conscious of that. Our old people were that way. So that's what I'm going to do for all of you. And that's what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to throw this knife into the ground. And I mean this in the most sincere way. It's an invisible virtual Zoom knife. You can't even actually use it on me. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that I'm going to be conscious of my words. And I apologize if I offend you. And if I offend you to the point where you're offended, you may use that knife on me. Not only that, but I'm also going to acknowledge the breath of life, that we are here, acknowledging that we're in this space in that way, in a good way. So I'm gonna do that. And I ask all of us to do that as well and think about that, because that teaching is an Indigenous teaching. It's also an important teaching. And it's something that I think really makes me conscious when I'm presenting to people and when I'm talking and doing this. So with that, we're gonna start. Holy smokes. That was the longest introduction ever. Everybody is saying on the line, they're like, man, this guy just nothing but talking. That's all he's doing is just talking. Well, guess what? You signed up for this, so you get to listen to me talk. All right, so I'm gonna assume that my screen is showing and it looks really good, and we can all see it in a good way, and then we'll start. So we're talking about Indigenous education, but Indigenous education, what I'm meeting and what I'm saying to each and every one of you is, I am saying that we are, it embodies everything. I need us to look at Indigenous education as being more than strictly and simply a school that goes from K to 12 or a university institution. It's education as our whole and who we are. It's a lifelong learning. It's a way of understanding and doing. So as we work with Indigenous people and Indigenous education, it's important to start with understanding relevant and respectful truth. So when we are working in Indigenous territories, and if If you're working and operating in the nation state of Canada, you are operating on Indigenous lands and Indigenous territories. You're operating on Indigenous lands that were never ceded or surrendered. You're operating on lands that were originally held and owned and functioned to the benefit of Indigenous people. We need to come to that understanding first and foremost, that claiming the land from Indigenous people, and claiming that was based on this doctrine of discovery that said they entered this land in this territory and there was nothing but heathens here, and heathens that were not smart enough to have a governance system, that didn't have enough capacity to develop this land and understand this land. So this doctrine of discovery was the basis of this, the colonization of our lands of Indigenous people. In 1792, the US Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson declared that the doctrine of discovery would extend from Europe to the infant US government, and the doctrine and its legacy continue to influence the imperialism of Turtle Island and the treatment of Indigenous peoples. This is the claim that non-Indigenous people have on Indigenous lands. Why is this significant, and why is this important for us to talk about? Because we need to understand that Indigenous people are in a state of trauma. And what trauma is it's grieving. It's grieving loss. It's grieving. There's trying to fill a void that we have. And what part of that, and the foundation of that, is grieving this disconnection of our lands and for the use of it in terms of that. So it's important for us to understand that the doctrine of discovery was one of those first implemental pieces in sorting out and understanding what this is. There's two pictures that I quite often show. The pictures here is a guy by the name of Thomas Keswick Moore. So this is the goal, and this was the image of success for Indigenous people in this country. They wanted to take the Indigenous child and change him in and assimilate him into the body politic of Canada. And the reason why this was, again, is to extract land and resources from Indigenous people. Because if you assimilate your mind, and you think and you work in this space. So this was the idea. This was the goal. And in order to extract that, in order to make that a reality, you need a weapon in order to extract that. So what weapon was used was this weapon of education. Westernized education system was used in order to in order to do that, to kill the Indian in the child, to really use education as a weaponized tool of assimilation. So again, you can see that the trauma is adding up and it's building up as we go through this and understand this. Now, when we as people that are working in this space, if we don't understand this idea of colonization, if we don't understand intergenerational trauma, if we don't understand what that is and how that works in our minds and where that space is, then we've put a barrier up to supporting and helping and building building our work with Indigenous young people and Indigenous people. So we are talking about prevention. We're talking about, thinking with a lens, a solution thinking lens, looking at the world as if, how do we sort this out so that we can help, our kids? And one of the biggest things that I've found in understanding is that we jump to solutions. We jump to ideas of ways to support our work without acknowledging truth first. So we have to acknowledge truth first. We need to acknowledge that trauma is a direct relation to colonization of lands and assimilation of languages and all of those pieces. We need to come to that realization and understanding that first and foremost, we need to acknowledge truth. And that goes for Indigenous and non-Indigenous relatives. Anybody that's working with Indigenous youth or young people in any kind of area, whether it's prevention, whether it's addictions, you know, whatever space that is, we need to acknowledge truth first. And once we acknowledge truth, then we're going to be able to think about and work forward in our paths of supporting and solution thinking this work. Now, the key to all of this, the key to this work and the key to figuring out ways to decolonize, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about decolonizing our thinking to support Indigenous people moving forward in this space. And the key to that is language. So I was told that we have guests from across Turtle Island, across Canada, in provinces and just different spaces and places. So wherever you are in the territory that you are existing in, the territory that you are standing on, working on and breathing on, that territory is specific and it belongs to a group of Indigenous people. The key to supporting and filling the void that's been lost in certain areas and certain things, the key to that work is that we need to decolonize and use language in order to do that. So I'm going to start with the Cree language and what was taught to me in terms of that. So all of us that are in this group right here, we have this ability to go out and learn, you know, a way to say something. So if I were to sit in here and we're surrounded by a group of Cree language, Plains Cree language speakers, I would ask them to interpret the following word, Tsigasan. I would say, what does that mean in English, Tsigasan? And they'll say to me, they'll look at me in English and they'll say, that means my name is, or that's what they call me. And in the English language, that interpretation is true to a point, but it's missing lots of really important, valuable teaching information. It's omitting a lot of worldview and a lot of ways of thinking differently. So when I looked at this, I was taught this by a few Cree language Jedis. My late uncle, Arsene Tatusis, my mother-in-law, Julia Olette, and saw another mentor that I have. His name is Barry Aheneku. All of them shared this teaching in regards to that word, Tsigasan. So the Cree language is descriptive. It describes the world around us. If you can describe it, there's a Cree word for it. There's an Indigenous language Nehia word for that, what if you can describe it. So you can describe anything that exists in this earth. So therefore, everything in this earth can be, there's a word for that. There's a phrase for that. And how the Cree language is built, it's built on this idea of root words, and we build descriptive words and we build this description of what it is. And we think about that in terms of a table. We call a table mitsunatik. So when we say mitsunatik, we actually are bringing two words together. We're bringing this piece of wood that we gather to eat on. You know, we talk about what that means, that we bring this piece of wood where all of us come together to share food, that we share this meal with one another. That because we're describing that. Yeah, in the English language it says table, but table is a thing. This gathering place, this piece of wood that we gather, this tree that we gather to eat on, it brings life to that. So I asked about this word Nitsigasan. Now, when I was a little kid, when I was this young kid, I was hyper. If you notice right now, I got a swivel chair and I'm moving around and I'm moving my feet around because I need to do that. I need to make sure that I stay busy that way. I always need to do that so that I can stay focused on what I'm doing. Now, when I was a kid, I used to run around all over and do that same thing. I had to stay busy in order to stay focused. And one of the things that the old people would mention to me and say to me, and especially my grandmother, is that they would say words like, he's searching for his belly button. And I used to think that was a crazy term. I was like, why are they saying that? That's such a crazy thing to say. He's searching for his belly button. And here's me as a 10-year-old kid. I'm like, I'm not searching for nothing. It's right here. I could see it. It's there. And I didn't understand that. I didn't understand what that meant. I had no idea how to grasp that concept of what that is. So, what ended up happening was that when I got this idea of learning more about language, something happened. My partner and I were expecting the birth of my first baby. And when that happened, my grandmother pulled me aside. Nugamigi upigihit. So my grandmother raised me, and she pulled me aside and she said to me, she said to me, my boy, she said, I want you to understand and know about your baby's belly button, she told me. She told me all of the protocols and all the ways that us as Nakota people looked after that. And then she looked at me and she said something really important to me again. She said, your baby is Cree. Your baby that's going to be born is Cree. I want you to go and find the protocols for Cree, she said. And then I want you to follow through with that when your baby's born. And I said, okay. And she gave me this beautiful teaching. I went forward and I talked to my mother-in-law and I talked to different people and, that would know and understand this way of understanding. And what ended up happening is that my mother-in-law said, told me the protocols, but then she said something else. She said, that word, she said, I want you to introduce yourself to me in Cree. And I said, Chris Scribe Sigasan. And she said, what does that word mean? And I said, well, Chris Scribe, my name's Chris Scribe. And she said, no. The root word of Sigasan is Nitsi. That means my belly button. And I thought, that's kind of weird. That's a strange concept for us to think about, that Chris Scribe, my belly button. That doesn't mean my name is. Why is belly button the root of our introductions into who we are? It goes on, and this goes with my grandmother's teachings about the power of our women, that our women feed our children in the womb through that belly, through that umbilical cord. And not only that, but that umbilical cord is a connection to our ancestors on the other side. That umbilical cord is life. It's about our connection to that spiritual place. But more than that, that umbilical cord is how our mothers bring life into this world. How they're able to feed and experience all of this beauty of what that is. And all the things that are part of that. So from that moment in time, and when that time came and my son was born, everything came into this kind of big realization. I came into this understanding that how powerful our women are. It was undescribable, this moment of, her strength and her power and everything that she was able to do to bring this life into this world. I couldn't grasp it. There were no words that described that. And when our baby was born, our baby was connected to my partner and my son's mother. They were connected through that umbilical cord. And when we cut that umbilical cord, it signifies that separation from being joined. And then we get joined in other ways. And I started to come to this wicked, awesome realization that Chris Scribe Nitsigasan doesn't mean my name is Chris Scribe. What I'm saying and what I'm acknowledging is, Chris Scribe, I exist on this earth because a mother brought me here. I exist on this earth because she fed me through that umbilical cord. And that umbilical cord is a connection to my ancestors. That through that, it's like a Wi-Fi signal to our ancestors. And how beautiful of an understanding and a piece of that, how beautiful that is for me to acknowledge that, for me to understand that, to come into that understanding was just phenomenal. Because up until that moment in time, I had a lot of questions because I was raised by my grandmother. My own mother was fighting addictions, based on the trauma that she experienced in her own life. And I carried a lot of that. I didn't physically tell it people, I didn't share that, but I carried it. And in that moment, in that time, I realized the struggle, and I realized the gift that she gave. I realized that that was the power of that moment. And it was an eye-opening piece to me. And now it's one word in our Indigenous languages: truth, and how we respect each other and how we continue to move forward and never give up. All of these pieces are powerful um, um, ways of decolonizing and working and understanding our work with young people. So one of the other things too at this time when I was just becoming a parent, what was told to me is that we get to choose who our parents are going to be, and the life that we're going to experience on this earth. We get to choose that. We get to see it. And when we get to see it, when we're on this journey of this sacred hoop of life and understanding what this journey is, what we're doing is we've seen this, we've experienced it. So we see that and we understand that this is the way we're going, and this is the way it was meant to be. And that we learn these beautiful things along the way. And I guess this is a key part to a lot of the work that I wanted to talk about here. Because our young people, so many of our young people that are battling addictions, that we're looking for answers for to support them in prevention, a lot of them, what's going on is they're searching for identity. They're searching for their belly button. A lot of our young people haven't understood or realized that Nitsigasan, we don't understand what that means. We don't understand where that is. You can see this picture here. This is an Alan Sapp picture that I'm showing on the screen right now. And in this picture, they have this swing, this Indian swing. All of my children, in accompanying with a moss bag or a cradle board, all of my children experience this. And while they experience this, we rock them back and forth in there. And man, there's magic to that swing. There's magic in there. I don't even know how the blankets stay up, like, to tell you the truth. The strings that are connecting in there, the blanket's not tied or anything. We swing our children in there and we sing to them. We talk to them. We experience that. And many years later, I visited a place at MacEwan University, Kihiwastin, this Indigenous Center for Students. And in the corner, I seen an adult swing like this. And I asked about it, and they said that in moments of stress and anxiety, any student that wants to go and swing in there, they're given permission to swing. And not only that, but there's somebody that's going to sing an Indian lullaby to them. And they're going to be able to go and experience that. And then I thought about it, and I thought about what that means by searching for your belly button and searching for who you are. A lot of our people that are struggling in different ways and different facets never got an opportunity to swing in there, never got an opportunity to experience that magic. And maybe that's what we do in order to help our children and help our young people to find those, is figure out how we do that and how we move in that space. So we have to figure out now that we know that trauma exists. I mean, there's report after report after report, RCAP, the TRC, the United Nations Declaration on Indigenous People. There's reports, MMIW, reports after reports that talks about trauma, that talks about reconciliation, that talks about us moving forward. There's all kinds of things that happen in this that have happened, that people have wrote about, that we've talked about. It's there already. We already acknowledge that it's there. So we have to really come to this space now. What are we going to do about it? What are we going to do with the truth that we have as we move forward? Well, I'm going to tell you what I did. I'm going to tell you how I did this. And it's right here. This is my path forward. This is the ideas that I had as I moved forward and as I thought about moving forward and the ways in which we do this. And I call it making pies and making babies, because these are pieces that are valuable and important to us, to me. So first and foremost, this picture right here is a picture of one of the most beautiful women that I've ever had the privilege and honor to ever know and be around. This is my grandmother. And at the age of 59 years old, she took a 1-year-old baby and she said, I'm going to raise him. When my father, and I didn't hear this story till I was in my 20s, my father traveled to Thompson, Manitoba. He went to go see his baby son, who was just a little under a year old. And his baby son had a burn on his hand from crawling around in an apartment building, stuck his hand in one of those heaters and burnt, 2nd-degree burns. And because my mother, his partner, was battling addictions, she wasn't able to care for this baby. My dad looked at her and said, I'll take him. I'll take this boy if you let me. He wasn't going to take her without her giving permission. She looked at him and she said, come back here on Friday and I'll give you an answer. So the days passed and Friday came and my father went to the door, and at the door, my bags were packed. My father picked me up and he took me to the airport in Thompson. He phoned his mother and he talked to his mother and he says, Mom, pick me up at the airport in Winnipeg. I got a present for you. Lo and behold, he walked off the plane holding this baby and he took me to my grandmother. And at 59 years old, my grandmother took me and she said she was going to raise me, and she was going to raise an Indian. She was going to raise a Nakota. Somebody to be proud of who they are, to carry on our traditions, to show them how kind and generous and loving we are. And this picture right here is a reminder to me of the education I received when I was in this house. She suffered from arthritis and couldn't peel the apples to make apple pie. So I would sit there and I would watch her and I'd peel the apples as we go and I would give them to her. I'd cut them up into the pie plates and she would make the dough and she would put them out. And I'd peel these apples and I'd put the apples in there. And all while she was doing this, she was teaching me and she was telling me stories. She was talking to me. She talked to me about her family, about growing up. She talked to me about life. She talked to me about all never wasting, making sure that we gave everything we can if visitors came. She talked about all of those things in these lessons. And over the years and growing up all my life, my grandmother gave me a PhD in the knowledge that she possessed and she carried. And all of that was over these times when her and I would sit down and we'd bake pies together. After she passed, and years came, and the grief of losing our loved one and losing my mother and my grandmother and losing this, it was so hard. And one of the ways I used in order to help me grieve through that process was I took out the pie plate. I took out all of the ingredients that she had. And by memory, because she never wrote it down, by memory, I made an apple pie. And while I made that, I thought about all the things that she taught me. And the first batch of apple pies are probably extra salty because of the tears that fell into the ingredients. But as I was listening, as I was remaking these, as I was doing this, as I was reminded of stories, I was reminded of the beauty of who she was. And all of that built a foundation into my soul. It built a foundation to who I am. Making apple pies isn't an Indigenous process. This is a process that she learned from a non-Indigenous space. But we took those ideas and she shared Indigenous things. And what she did, she also shared those pies. She gave them away. She gave them to people. She fed them. And all of these things we did from that space and that understanding of what it means to be Nakota. So every time that I make a pie, every time I do that, I think about that gift that she gave me. I think about the process that we did and we had with one another. I look at this and all of us have this ability to do this work. All of us have the ability to listen to story from our old people. We have this ability to connect in different ways. It doesn't always have to be in these big ceremonial lodges. Those are important and valuable for sure. But sometimes the knowledge of storytelling, sometimes the knowledge of sharing, sometimes prevention happens when making apple pies. And I am forever grateful and thankful for this gift that she gave me. Because I look at this picture right here and I don't see Mikush, I don't see my grandmother. I don't see the ingredients. I see the stories that surround her. I see the stories that she shared. I see the stories in her hands that she talks about as she went through that. So for me, it's making pies. For some students, it's playing cards. For some students, it's building something. For some students, it's having a laughing and joking and having a good conversation. So we have to think about what that means for an individual when we're working with them. What is their apple pie? And if there's nothing there, then we have to create that experience for them. We have to create the experience of what that is and help them fill the void. Because apple pies are part of Nitsigasan. It's part of me finding my belly button. It's part of me understanding my identity. That's part of who I am. The next part of this, and a part of our work that we need to come to this great, beautiful understanding, is just simply this: making babies. Now, it was funny. I remember I met somebody for the first time and they said, "I know you, you're that making pies and making babies guy." And I was like, what? I didn't even remember this slide or what this was. But what I mean by that is we have an obligation to our young people to do the best that we can for them. And for Indigenous young people and for this territory that we live in, breathe on, this is Indigenous land, Indigenous territory. Sometimes we get into the conversations of why do we have to do Indigenous ways of knowing in everything we do. Why? Well, I'm going to tell you why. Because that's what we should expect when we're working and living on Indigenous lands. For example, if I were to go to Germany, let's say I lived in Canada and I'm a German and I lost my German culture, my German dance, my German language, my German drinking ability. I lost my German oral stories. I lost my stories of my German heritage. Where would I go to relearn that? Well, I would go to Germany because I would expect that in the country of Germany, that dance and language and culture and heritage, ways of knowing, all of those different things, I would expect them to be living and breathing there. I would expect it to flourish there. And I can go there to relearn if I wanted to, because that's the original home of that knowledge and that language. That's the original home of that spirit of who that is. Now, I'm Nakota. If I lost my Nakota dancing, my Nakota songs, my Nakota language, my Nakota heritage, my Nakota ways of knowing, where would I go to relearn that if they were extinct from this place? Nowhere. Because they exist here. This is their land. This is the land of that knowledge. And if it's gone from here, there's nowhere for me to go. There's no land I can travel to. So I would expect that all of us participate in the knowledge that surrounds us and the knowledge that exists here, that we uplift it, that we think about that in everything that we do. We think about that process just like we would if we were to travel to Ireland, if we were to travel to Spain, if we were to travel to these different places in the world. We would expect that culture, that language, that ways of knowing to exist and to live and to thrive in that space. So we need to expect that in the work that we do on these lands and these territories, wherever you are. And it's not for to appease me or to make politicians happy, or, you know, for a social media shout out. It's not for any of that. Who that's for is for these young people. These children here are my children. These are my children. These are my babies. And there's one more that got added to this, and this is from a few years ago. So, you know, still making babies. But these children here have the hope of doing something different, that I'm going to give them the opportunity to be more Indigenous than I had growing up. That I'm going to make sure that when they get into the spaces and places that they need to get into, that they're going to have a stronger footing, a stronger foundation to create space for themselves. That in our work and the people and the spaces that they find and people that they work with, that space is created for them. Because this is what we should expect when we live on their territories. And what it's going to do is it's going to expand the knowledge that we have. It's going to expand our processes so that we can create this beautiful system of doing things to support in a good way. So John Trudell, when one lives in a society where people can no longer rely on the institutions to tell them the truth must come from culture and art. So we need to celebrate and speak and allow these talks and these discussions to happen, and in whatever form that is. If it's dance, if it's song, if it's painting, if it's poetry, that art is a conduit for us to reconnect to who we are. That institutions are systems. The institution that you're working for right now is a hamster wheel. And people get with this in this mindset that I'm going to get in there and I'm going to change the system from within. I'm going to change this system. So they look at that hamster wheel, they get all pumped up, they shake their shoulders and they're like, okay, how are you going to change it, Chris? What are you going to do? Well, I'm going to get in that system and I'm work harder than everybody. I'm going to work harder than anybody's ever seen anybody work. And I'm going to change it that way. So I get in that hamster wheel and I get on there and I run harder than everybody. Nobody's seen how hard I ran. Nobody's ever seen anybody work this hard in that hamster wheel. And what happens is that hamster wheel's turning and turning and turning as fast as it can go. But I don't go anywhere. And what ends up happening is I burn out, I get tired, and I get off and I look back and nothing's changed. So then another person comes along and they said, well, working hard isn't the way to do it. You have to do things differently. So now this person's going to get on there. They get on there. John gets on this hamster wheel and I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to do this different than anybody's ever seen before. So they get on that hamster wheel and they run 2 fast steps and then they walk, and run 5 and then walk. And it's different than anybody else that's ever tried it. And pretty soon after a number of tries and a number of times doing this, they get tired and they burn out and they get off and they said, I can't do it. And they look back at that hamster wheel and it doesn't change. It still kept turning around. So somebody else comes along and they're like, okay, I'm going to do this the opposite. You couldn't do it working harder. You couldn't do it doing differently. I'm going to do the opposite of what that system's wanting me to do. So they get on the hamster wheel and they start running backwards. They start running backwards and they do it differently and harder, and they run backwards and they're fighting the system all the way around. And the system's turning now a little bit here and there. Then they burn out and they get off and they look back and the system continues to roll. The hamster wheel continues to roll. This is the nature of the work that we have, to try to figure out how we create this space within this space when we have to think differently about how we approach these. The goal isn't to get on the hamster wheel and do things different or work harder or fight it constantly. The goal that we have to do and what we have to come to understand is that we need to break that system. That we need to create a system that's relevant and applicable to the people that we're serving. We need to create something that's for them. We need to create a system that they built, that they feel is valuable, that they feel is important. That's easier said than done. It's difficult to get into this understanding where we can get in there and do this work, but it's hard. Now, with the help of a few different things, I developed this idea of what's called an Indigenous way of knowing in our original education. And in this Indigenous way of knowing and in this Indigenous education, one thing that really came up that was part of this and part of this work was this idea to do this difficult work. And whatever capacity that we're in and whatever job title we have or whatever it is that we're doing and working for young people, what I found was when I showed this one slide and we talk about revitalizing the past to build up our original education system, that what I'm talking about is when people are struggling with addictions, they're trying to fill a void. I remember when I started my teaching career, I was in a presentation where they're talking, no, I wasn't in a presentation. I was reading a presentation about poverty in the inner city schools in Chicago, and how parents would go out and they would buy their children these $200 Jordans, and they put them on their feet, and they couldn't put groceries in the cabinets, but they were buying these expensive things for their kids in the moment in time. And they did this research study as to why did they do that. The logical thing was for them to buy Pampers and to buy food with that $200, to buy the things that they needed in order to survive. They knew that they were going to go without, but they bought the shoes anyway. Why did they do that? It's because there was a void in their original education system, that these young people, because of poverty, because of the circumstances that they're living in, because of trauma, there was a void in who they were. And they wanted and needed to fill that void. So in order to do that, we find things that make us feel good immediately, make us feel good right now, make us feel good in the moment. It's never long lasting. It's never going to last a long time. It disappears. And the same goes for that void, and we constantly try to fill it. We fill it with bad relationships, with drug and alcohol abuse. We fill that with anger, with gangs. Like, we're filling this with temporary, identity, and because it makes us feel good right now. So in that same moment, when I was reading this research, I was also looking at our kids in the schools that I was teaching. And I was noticing that parents would go out and buy the latest gaming system, knowing that these parents were on social assistance, that were suffering from day to day, trying to figure out how they're going to live. But these kids had the nicest gaming systems out there. It's because they were filling that void. They were doing the same thing that those parents, those single mothers in inner city Chicago were doing. They were wanting to make their kids feel good, and they feel good right now as well. And I mean, gambling is also a part of that. We notice that as well. By winning, it makes us feel good in the moment, but then we go back into it. So our goal is to create an original education system, our original sacred hoop, to rebuild identity in all of our kids and our young people, to rebuild that understanding, to help to sort that out for the difference makers and the people that are going to make a change. And that's for those that are not yet born. So how do we do that? How do we promote that? What are the things that we can do where we are? And this is where I want to talk to everybody, because everybody likes a list, man. Everybody likes a list, a to-do list. So here we go. This is the best that I can do for each and every one of you, is to look at this. And we have the capacity wherever we are to do this work. And we can do this work. All we have to do is make the effort to get out of our comfort zones, to build a different system. So here we go. Number one is we need to keep it local. So wherever you are, wherever you're working, there's local knowledge. There's knowledge that's local to the community. There's knowledge that exists in the space that you're living and breathing in. Knowledge exists there. Go out and search and find it. If you're in Northern Ontario, Northern Alberta, Northern Saskatchewan, wherever you are, and you're wanting to incorporate the knowledge specific to the people, don't go to Texas. Don't talk to them about the knowledge of Southwestern United States, because that's what Google brought up. The knowledge exists within the local context of where you're working. Find it, seek it out. And you can't tell me that you can't, or it's something that you cannot do. If you have an administrator, if you have a supervisor, or if there's supervisors and there's administrators on this call, put that in a PD opportunity, making sure that we go out and we extract, or we go and find out local knowledge, local people, make sure that we find it, make it relevant to the places that we're in. Knowledge from outside in different spaces is important, but the foundation and the core of Nitsigas and of who they are exists there in the community. So find what that is, find what that looks like, build it up so that we're knowledgeable about it. Number two, we need to know who our elders and knowledge keepers are in our community. It takes 5 conversations with people from the community to get pointed in the direction of who these people are. They're not the ones that put their hands up and say, I'm going to come and do that for an honorarium. The people, the knowledge keepers, are the ones that are waiting for us to visit them in their homes with protocol and sit down and visit and have some tea with them. They're waiting for us, and we can go out and we can find them. Number 3, we need to make believers out of non-believers. What I mean by that is that the system, the hamster wheel, has existed for many years. And this hamster wheel has been exclusionary to Indigenous peoples, for success for Indigenous people. And because of that, what ends up happening is that we never fit in there. We always feel like we don't belong, or we're not part of that process. So because of that, what we have to do is we have to change the thinking. And a lot of people benefit from the system that was in place before. Lots of people benefit and have lived in that, have worked in that, have done things that way for 30 plus years, 20, 30, 40 years. I've worked in it. And I don't believe that changing it's going to make a difference, or doing something different is going to make a difference. We have to show them and make them believe, make them understand that if we do things differently, we're going to help this group of people that are struggling. And how we do that is we need to show the example of it. People will believe, people will listen to someone talk, but people will follow the things that you do. That's one of the keys to all of this. That's how we make these believers out of non-believers. Number 4, we need to ask the right questions. So whatever capacity, whatever space we're in, whatever people that we're talking to, the right questions need to be asked. When I'm next month, I'll be finished my PhD. But in this process of graduate work in my master's and my PhD, one of the things that I had to make sure that I did is I had to make sure and write the right questions. I had to put forward an effort. I had to know what I'm talking about. I had to know and understand different research methodologies. I had to know and understand this pedagogy. I had to know and understand all of these different things. I had to know it. I had to learn it. I had to go and find resources and people to tell me about it. So that when I got an opportunity to ask questions, I was going to ask the right questions from an academic standpoint. That doesn't change when we're working and doing this work with Indigenous people. When you go see an elder and knowledge person, when you go and do this work, when you go and do that, you have to be able to ask the right questions. You have to prepare yourself. What do you want to get out of this? Do the research, do the work, so that when you're sitting in front of them, that you're going to get the genius level PhD knowledge that they have. You're going to get that without going in there and asking, let's say, how's the weather? How about those Rough Riders? How are they doing? Have you seen the maple leaves? Man, they're awesome this year. You're going to get questions, you're going to get answers that are not relevant to the work you're doing. So prepare yourself and make sure that you put those into the right spaces. Number 5 is we need to put on an Indigenous lens. In my teaching career, my teaching area 1 is English language arts. My master teaching is English language arts. If you've listened to any of the work that I've done, I'm not English, but I had to go forward and I had to find and make sure that when I was teaching English, I knew everything I needed to know. I need to make sure that when I was standing in front of those kids, that I knew the content, that I also knew how to teach it. I knew that when I taught it, that I was confident in that. Knew that I was respectful of that subject area, because I knew that if I wasn't respecting it, I couldn't teach it properly. So there's no difference. All of us have the opportunity to put on an Indigenous lens when we're looking at the work that we're doing. Every single thing that you are doing when working for young people, you need to have an Indigenous lens on everything. Your reports, the way in which you work with young people, the conversations that you have, put an Indigenous lens on. And if you don't feel confident in putting on a lens and seeing things in that space, then you're going to need to make sure that you go out and research and find that. Non-Indigenous people that I've worked with in a school system, one of the biggest excuses as to not to teach Indigenous culture and language is them saying, I don't want to do it wrong and somebody get mad at me because of that. Well, that's awesome. Except I don't have that option when teaching English language arts, teaching a subject area. I don't have the option of saying, I don't want to teach ELA, in this class because I don't want to do something wrong and someone come and get mad at me. I have to make sure that I go forward and do the work and make sure that I'm confident in that. And just like writing a research paper, just like writing a paper for a university or wherever it is, at the end, the people that helped you write that, the citations that you used, you create this citation list to back you up. For Indigenous and non-Indigenous people that are using an Indigenous lens, you need backup. You need elders and knowledge keepers in order to stand behind you and say, yes, I gave them that information. So that if somebody comes up to them and says, that's wrong, what you're doing is wrong and you shouldn't be teaching it, all you can say is, okay, let's you and I go have a conversation with Elder Jim. Elder Jim is the one who gave me the rights to talk about this. And let's go ask him. If you don't have backup, if you don't have a reference, if you don't have that piece and that's backing you up, and you just take that and you have no way to back it up, just like writing a research paper with no backup, we have nothing to help us, nobody to fight for us, no one to stand with us. So we have to make sure that we create that and build that up as well. Number 6, we can never become complacent. The moment that we stop moving forward is the moment that we're doing a disservice to the people, the young people we're working for. If people are riding out the rest of their career to get to their pension or to get to their retirement date, y'all need to quit. You need to get out now, pull your pension wherever it is, take the penalty, open a Tim Hortons and become a millionaire or something. But stop working for our people because you're hurting them. Stop working for young people because you're hurting them. We can always continue to move forward. We can always move forward. But the moment that we stop, the moment that we're complacent is the moment that no innovation happens. It's the moment when we stop figuring out the best solution for the young people. So we have to continually move, continually push, continue to disrupt. We have to, even if it's small steps, as long as we're moving forward. So never become complacent. Number 7, stop working on an island. You would have heard speeches like what I'm doing, maybe like a bunch of times, and the politicians pounding the table and getting everybody fired up, and then afterwards, nothing. Afterwards, we go back to the same old, same old. What a conference does, and always the most valuable piece from when I remember them, What I remember being a participant is the conversations of working with people that are doing the work that you're doing. Those were always valuable and important, powerful conversations. They would help us build and move forward in phenomenal ways. We tend to work on an island because our ego tells us that we're the only ones who can do this work. We're not. We are not. And ego is the thing that will destroy. It's the kryptonite to working with young people. We need to stop thinking that we are the be all end all of everything great in this world, but because other people are doing phenomenal work. And if we reach out and we work with them and create conversations with them, build it up with them, then great things are going to happen. So we need to stop working on islands, reach out, talk to people. Don't be afraid to share the struggles that you have and the paths that you need to move. Don't be afraid of those. Have those conversations moving forward. And number 8, and the last one here that I have is don't be afraid to fail. The moment that we're scared of failure is the moment that we never do anything great for our people, for our young people. So we have to try new things, and if it fails, it fails. And to the leaders that are in this group, to the people that are supervisors, allow your staff and your spaces to fail. You get paid the big bucks in order to take the blame for that failure. When your staff and when your people working on the ground levels are doing great things and they're acknowledged for that, it's your job to uplift them and put them at the head of the piece so that people could recognize them. That's the struggle of leadership in whatever capacity that we're in, is that we take the bullets and we allow them when there's no bullets, we allow them to stand there and take the accolades. And we can't allow and penalize our people for trying different things if they fail. So what if they fail? We figure out how we build them up so that they don't fail the next time, that their ideas move forward in a good way. So, ladies and gentlemen, relatives, this is the presentation that I had. This is what I wanted to share with each and every one of you. And every single time before I talk and before I have these conversations, I say a prayer. Now on my screen, it just got 3 of us. I don't even know who's in this group or what it looks like. But I know that before I did this presentation, before I talked, I invited my ancestors. I invited my grandmother. I invited Nimoshim to sit with me and all my relatives to stand here that are no longer physically on this earth. So our room and our space is filled up. And I asked them to help me. Help me to create a conversation. No conference. I don't care how deadly it is. I don't care how much you paid a speaker or how phenomenal it is that the keynote. It's not going to change the world. It's not going to change this struggle that we're all in. It's not going to do that. All that I asked for was that I give you a spark, and a spark that you can take home to your communities and start a fire. And what I want you to do with that fire is I want you to burn the shit out of that hamster wheel. And I want you to create something great, because our kids need it, because our future needs it. Because I'm sick and tired of failing Indigenous people. I'm sick and tired of missing and murdered Indigenous women. And I don't want to see the rise in these large numbers of our youth being swallowed up searching for their belly buttons with addictions, with gangs. I don't want to see that anymore. And I can't do that solo, and you can't do it solo, because we're just simple like that. But together we're strong. Together we have the ability to do something great and powerful that's going to help our people moving forward. So hi, kanina skumptin, piramaya, thank you very much. I don't know, Dale, if there's any questions. There's just a couple minutes left, so I think I did pretty good.
Wow, Chris, that was a very powerful presentation. I felt the energy from the from the slides and just the way you presented it and the teachings and the, just the power of storytelling. It's very, very moving, very teaches just the way you do it and just in its own way and just the way you presented it. Like I was just sitting back and just learning as much as I can and just even reflecting on my own position with the Institute and, the roles that we all have and doing the work, right? So thank you for sharing that. So 3 minutes to 4 o'clock. We went up to right to 4 o'clock. So thank you, Chris. So if anybody out there that likes to shoot a message in the chat box or the Q&A, now's the time. Chris is open to answer your questions as best as he can. So we got a couple of messages in chat box. Thank you, Chris. Great way to put the message of finding your belly button from Donna Benach. Donna is with a group of people too as well in a room up in Lorange. We can't see them right now, unfortunately. And we got Shania Andrew who said, thank you so much. Your style of presentation is great. Then we got from Saskatchewan Prevention, amazing presentation. Then another from thank you, Chris, that was so impactful, from Deborah Bullier.
I paid them all, Dale. I paid all of them. I got all my friends. I said, make sure you put good things in the chat box so that.
Yeah, that was really great. So we got some instant feedback. LOL. Awesome, Chris. Don't be afraid to fail. Excellent talk. And that's from SVCPP. Donna's laughing. We got a couple of minutes. But yes, thank you, Chris. It was very moving. I like how you used your own personal story to teach those with, the outcomes of it. I really think that really takes a lot home for us in our work, in our different capacities working with young people. And even to put that in Notion, the belly button and the importance of it, it makes me think in the ways I view my own mother and the things that she went through to put me in here in this situation today. So just giving her that honor and thanks, it's a good reminder. Alrighty. So yes, thank you once again, Chris. If you have any questions, if you want to reach out to Chris, you can leave your email address in the chat box. So if anybody needs to follow up with you or to connect with you with your type of work, and a good way to network with the people that we have in this session. So Chris dropped his email in a Dropbox for you guys to copy and paste into your email, your emails, and to take that back with you, and along with his story and his teachings and his wisdom.
Awesome. And Dale, I do some work with, this piece I created in Think Indigenous, and also with Walks First consulting stuff that I do, aside from the millions of other jobs that I have. But we're doing a free online panel on Indigenous education coming up. It's called This Tea Taste Colonial. So we're gonna do sessions. The first one is with Indigenous chiefs, talking about their dreams and their aspirations for their communities and their nations moving forward. Then we're going to work with urban Indigenous people on the res, just 4-part series. So keep an eye open for it. It's coming up next Tuesday, live on social media, on Instagram and Facebook. And then we're going to also put it on YouTube. So just so you know that those are out there, keep an eye out for them. They're free. They'll be after work. So you can tune it on, and when you're cooking supper at 6 o'clock. So thank you all for the invite. I appreciate you. Good to see you, Dale. Always good to see relatives, once in a while. And also hope I passed the test, Dr. Large. I hope I made the cut, I hope that was it. So thank you all, and have a great rest of the conference, or however long you're gonna go, and I hope everything turns out well. So hi.
All right, thank you, Chris. Take care. Be safe. Thank you all today for joining us. It was a long day full of information and good storytelling. So take care out there. See you tomorrow, and be safe.